Yo, what is up guys? The new solo victory cups are starting in just a couple days time, so in today's video I'm going to be taking you guys through multiple different tips and strategies I used which help me regularly qualify to the finals and even get a top 800 placement last season in the solo victory cup opens. If you do enjoy today's video, please do drop a like and subscribe as I have lots more competitive content coming very soon. Now quickly, just before we get into today's video, I do have a quick announcement for the channel. I want to mention that due to popular demand, I have now set up channel memberships for this channel. It's been my dream since I was a kid to do content full time, and these memberships provide another option to earn income to ensure that I can continue posting these competitive videos you guys like on the channel. Memberships start from as low as £2 a month, and you can ensure that you get benefits such as emotes to use in YouTube comments, as well as cool member badges, and also the ability for me to add you on Discord and be shouted out in future videos. If you are interested, the member join link is available in the description of this video, and a massive thank you to those who have already become members, that being Voltage, Okeston, Maverick and the Kid Drippy. I really do appreciate it, and I've left their channel links in the description if you do wish to check them out. Now without further ado, let's get on to today's video. Okay, so firstly, just with the new season, I want to share some general information on what Epic has changed. Now they've actually changed the days in which these tournaments will be held on, with them now being held on every Friday for the next 4 weeks, obviously during Chapter 2 Remix, between the times of 5 to 7 PM UK time for the opens and 8 to 9 PM UK time for the finals. Qualification ranges have stayed the same as previous seasons, meaning it still remains pretty easy to qualify as it's top 15,000 on EU and top 10,000 on NA. Now let me talk you through some strategies and tips you can use to help you actually qualify every week. Alright, so first off, the first tip I want to talk about is actually doing a late start. So typically when I used to play these solo cash cuts back in the day, I always used to wait for the tournament to begin and queue as soon as it started, but I'd end up getting actually a really quite tough lobby and go down before the end game, effectively just wasting my time. Now the idea behind late starting is that you start 10 to 15 minutes late after the tournament begins, and this is in order to be put into lower elo lobbies. Now the reason for this is because most players that are in this low elo have died off spawn in their first couple games, meaning typically they're not that great of a player. This also means that the first game you queue into is likely to be very dead, as many people will try and drop high elimination W key games to catch back up to the others that started on time. This then leads to there being very few people alive when it gets to the end game. Effectively then, this can lead to you easily being able to get a top 5 placement in the first game, securing a lot of placement points which you need to help you out towards getting that qualification. You can also take some fight in these lower elo lobbies as the players aren't likely to be that great, but if you do take a fight, I would definitely recommend rotating to the dead side of zone to avoid being W keyed, and then look to take fights with worse and more unconfident players on dead side where you are also less likely to be third partied. Now for my second tip, I want to talk about the point system and the importance of top 5s. Now this season Epic have left the points format exactly the same, this being 65 points per win and 1 point per kill, with most of the placement points being given out in the top 5. Now with call this season on EU and NA expected to be around 125 points, we estimate that 2 top 5s as well as 1 solid game is enough to qualify. Now the reason why getting into that top 5 is so important is because let's take this scenario for example. Let's say we have 2 players that are in the same game. Player 1 dies in 10th and spends 24 minutes in the game. Now player 2 does a bit better and actually survives until 4th, spending just an extra 1 minute in the game to player 1. Player 1 who came in 10th will gain 21 placement points, whereas player 2 who survived for just 1 more minute but came in 4th place will gain 43 points from placement, which is an insane increase of 22 points. The crucial point that I'm trying to get across to you guys here is to understand that both players made it to the end game, yet the player that made it into the top 5 benefited substantially more from placement points. 2 top 5s from placement alone is around 80 points, so if you add to this a few points from elims, you really only need 1 more game of getting into the top 10 for you to qualify. Now let's talk about strategies you can use in game to help you get to end game every single game. So for my third tip, I want to talk about your drop spot and disengaging off of spawn. Now it's common knowledge in these victory cups that the easiest way to throw them is through dying off spawn on a regular basis in lots of your games. Now the strategy I used all of last season to successfully get off spawn and call in just 3 games was all about tactically disengaging and avoiding fighting at your drop spot. I believe that with an early game fight, your best chance to eliminate your opponent contesting you comes straight away at the beginning the second you land, when they have minimal loot and shield. If you can't eliminate them straight away, I'd always try and disengage away from them in order to avoid a fight off spawn, which will end up making both players involved shambles. Now, with there being no solo victory cups yet, we don't actually have any data on which drop spots are likely to be more or less contested, but I would always recommend landing at slightly less popular POIs this season, such as Slurpy Swamp or Craggy Cliffs, if if you want to regularly get off spawn, as you will likely only be conned by 1 or 2 players, and you can use the building/terrain nearby to strategically avoid getting into an off spawn fight. Now, my fourth tip that I want to talk about is about rotating dead side, but also as well as this, a rather unconventional point, which is about prioritizing minimal movement within the mid game. Now, once you have made it off spawn, you now have the task of trying to get through the mid game successfully in order to get to the end game where you can then access all of the heavy placement points. Now, my strategy which I've been using is to rotate to the dead side of the map, which is the area of the map where the least players will be. For example, I'm going to explain this by if the zone pulls to the north of the current map, the areas near Steamy and Cragley are likely to be on the dead side, as no players have had to rotate into here, meaning the only players that landed there are still likely to be in that area. Whereas areas like the Dog Pound, for example, and Salty Springs on the edge of zone are likely to be way more contested, as you have players from popular POIs such as Misty Meadows and Lazy Lake that will have to rotate in towards zone, leading to this getting into quite a congested area. Now, this is quite unconventional, but I recommend trying to minimize your movement in the mid game as much as possible. If you can find a building to sit in or a bush to hide in, for example, during mid game, this is perfect to help secure that you stay alive in the mid game in order to make it to end game. As well as this, when you sit in the bush and when you sit in the building, I'd recommend that you always are alert of your surroundings so you know if a player is coming nearby, where therefore you can use the element of surprise to surprise them and hopefully pick off a free elimination with minimal effort. Now, next up, I want to talk about something that I feel isn't highlighted in these videos enough, and that's going to be my fifth tip, which is time management. Now, specifically, I want to talk about avoiding fights at crucial parts of the game. For example, if you die around the top 20, you have spent a lot of time in the game, often up to 20 minutes, and often you won't have gained much placement points as a result. In order to manage time successfully, it's crucial that you make use of the games you spend a long time in and make it all the way to that top 5 scenario, as this is the most beneficial for your points total. You don't want a game where you spend 15 minutes in, for example, and die in 30th place, as this will only gain you around 5 placement points and ends up being a big waste of time. Now, there are certain times throughout the tournament which you can queue in at where you're likely to get a less/more stacked game. For example, if you queue at 6:20, for example, on the new times, there is still 40 minutes remaining in the Solo Victory Cup. This means that players in that game will still have enough time to play the full 27-minute game of Fortnite out and then queue into another game after this, meaning that your game that you're currently in with them is likely to be stacked, and you could even have the possibility of surge as everyone is playing for placement. However, if you queue, for example, with just 15 minutes left, so at 6:45, this is an advantage because most of the players in the lobby will try to W key to gain some Elim points before leaving or intentionally killing themselves due to fall damage to queue into that final game. This means that the game you're in there is likely to be extremely dead, and you can capitalize on this getting easy placement. Now, this means that again, if you in these games you get a dead lobby, you can just rotate to the dead side of the map, avoid fights, and then camp out getting into that top 5 again, helping you to secure the second top 5 you need in order to get that qualification through to the finals. So now you know all the tips you need to qualify to the Solo Victory Cup finals. I would recommend you click this video on screen to learn about this season's meta to help you know what you need to carry and where to find certain items to be successful. Thank you guys for watching.